The spear hits the ground before anyone says a word. 3 hunters left at sunrise. They return after dark with an empty hide, a broken point, and no meat. Beside the fire, a child is scraping the last soft marrow from yesterday's bone. There are no crops in a field, no grain in a storehouse, no herd waiting behind a fence. If the hunt has failed, what is left to eat? This was not a rare inconvenience. Large animals offered valuable fat, protein, and calories, but finding them was uncertain. Approaching them was dangerous. Killing one was never guaranteed. So why did an empty hunt not empty the camp? Because the hunt was never the whole food system. The answer was already around them, below the soil, inside shells, along the water's edge, and in the memories of people who knew where to look. But that answer creates a mystery. If these quiet foods mattered so much, why does prehistory so often look like a story made almost entirely from meat? The bones did not lie, but they told only the part of the story that survived. Animal bone can remain in the ground for thousands of years. Stone points and butchery marks can survive beside it. A root is eaten, fruit collapses. Leaves, wooden digging sticks, baskets and prepared meals usually disappear. The archaeological record therefore has a natural bias. The dramatic hunt leaves a skeleton. A morning spent collecting plants may leave almost nothing obvious at all. Almost nothing is not the same as nothing. At Ologosaile in Kenya, archaeologists examined stones from a site about 1 million years old. Shallow pits in their surfaces held microscopic plant particles called phytoliths. The evidence showed that early humans used the stones as hammers and anvils to crush nuts, underground tubers, and other plant foods. In that particular excavation, the plant-working stones remained, even though animal bones did not. Turn the usual picture around, and the lesson is startling. Sometimes the meal that vanished can be detected only through the tool that broke it open. This does not mean meat was unimportant. It means a pile of bones is not a complete menu. And when large prey disappeared, one of the most useful foods was hidden where a hunter looking across the horizon might never see it. Under his feet, roots, tubers, and rhizomes are not glamorous prey. They do not run. They do not fight back. But they carry energy underground, protected from many changes in weather. Finding them requires a different kind of skill. The useful leaves may appear for only part of the year. The edible section may sit beneath hard soil. 2 plants growing side by side can conceal very different things below the surface. A practiced collector is not simply wandering until food appears. They are reading season, soil, slope, and leaf shape, then remembering the location long after the visible growth has changed. At Border Cave in South Africa, charred remains preserve a remarkable piece of that knowledge. Early Homo sapiens collected starchy hypoxis rhizomes and cooked them at least 170,000 years ago. The rhizomes could have been eaten where they were dug up. Instead, they were carried back to the cave and roasted in the fire's heat and ash. Researchers cannot reconstruct the exact people who collected them or every rule of sharing, but transport back to a residential place is consistent with food being brought to others. Now return to our empty-handed hunters. Their failure is real, but while they followed hoofprints, other members of the group may have been following leaves. One search ended with an empty spear. The other could end with food that had never moved at all. There was one dangerous catch. Finding a root did not make it dinner. The same landscape could hide calories, bitterness, and poison in remarkably similar packages. Some wild plants contain compounds that discourage animals from eating them. Others are too tough for the human body to use efficiently when raw. Even an edible species can be unpleasant or unsafe if the wrong part is eaten or the preparation is incomplete. This is where food became technology. At Shanidar Cave in Iraqi Kurdistan, microscopic examination of charred food fragments revealed crushed pulses, including wild peas and other legumes. Some of the material came from layers associated with Neanderthal occupation more than 70,000 years ago. At Shanidar, and later at Franchthi Cave in Greece, the fragments show more than collection. Seeds had been pounded. Evidence in their structure is consistent with soaking and heating. Bitter and astringent ingredients were deliberately processed into cooked food. Pounding broke hard structures. Soaking could remove part of the bitterness and unwanted plant chemicals. Heating softened the food and changed what the body could extract from it. The toolkit was simple: stone, water, a container or skin where available, and fire. The knowledge was not simple at all. How long should this plant soak? Which seeds can be roasted directly? Which root must never be confused with the one beside it? No fossil preserves the first lesson, but one mistake could make a person ill, and one remembered solution could feed a group for generations. The emergency reserve was not a cupboard. It was memory. Yet even a landscape rich in plants changes with rain, cold, and season. What happened when the ground offered little, and the large animals still did not appear? The next solution was to stop measuring food by the size of the animal. At Gesher Benot Yaakov, in what is now Israel, researchers studied the remains of large freshwater fish associated with repeated hearth activity. Heat changes in the fish's teeth support the conclusion that hominins cooked fish there about 780,000 years ago. Fishing required its own knowledge of shallows, seasons, and movement. But a fish did not need to be chased across open country, and a productive stretch of water could be visited again. At Border Cave, another food source moved even more slowly. Large land snails were carried back, heated and eaten from roughly 170,000 years ago. A snail could not replace a large carcass by itself. That is precisely the point. Survival did not depend on finding one magical substitute for meat. It depended on combining many smaller opportunities: roots, nuts, seeds, fruit, shellfish, fish, insects, eggs, small animals, and meat, whenever meat was available. Not every item existed in every landscape. Not every group used the same mix. There was no single Stone Age diet. The advantage was flexibility. But flexibility creates a final problem. One person cannot remember every waterhole, fruiting tree, underground stem, dangerous lookalike and seasonal return. So where was all that knowledge stored? It was stored in people. An older collector could show a younger one where a digging stick should enter the soil. Someone who had prepared bitter seeds before could recognize when soaking was finished. A child cracking nuts was not merely eating. They were learning which shell, stone, and blow worked best. Knowledge also allowed a group to divide risk. If everyone followed the same herd, everyone could return empty-handed. If different people searched different parts of the landscape, one failure did not have to become a collective disaster. We should be careful here. Archaeology rarely tells us the exact age or sex of the person who collected a particular root. Modern stereotypes cannot simply be projected thousands of years backward. What the evidence does support is repeated processing, transport, and shared use. These were learned behaviors, not random bites taken in desperation. The most reliable meal may therefore have begun long before hunger arrived, in a remembered patch of soil, a practiced movement, a warning about the wrong seed, and a technique taught beside an earlier fire. Now the opening scene can finally be completed. The three hunters have returned with nothing, but the camp is not empty. Rhizomes lie roasting beneath hot ash. Nuts are being cracked against a worn stone. A small fish cooks near the edge of the fire. The child who was scraping the last bone is handed something warm. Tomorrow, the hunters may succeed. Meat will matter when it comes. Tonight, their failure does not decide whether everyone eats. The spear was one survival tool. So was the digging stick, so was the hammerstone, so was fire. And behind all of them was the tool that left the faintest archaeological trace, a shared memory of what the landscape could become. The heroic hunt gave prehistory its most dramatic remains. The quiet foods helped keep humans alive between the victories. If you want to see how humans survived ordinary life before it became comfortable, like this video and subscribe to Before Comfort.